Most people can happily float along the pool swimming breaststroke with their head above the water. But for triathlon, you're going to need to switch to front crawl. That means head in the water, not being able to breathe as easily, not being able to see where you're going, and it can be quite intimidating. And if you've targeted a triathlon, it's often the most daunting part. So today we're going to be looking at how you can convert your breaststroke into front crawl. Before we begin, we should probably address the fact that fitness is not actually the most important factor in swimming. So don't worry, you're not going to be working too hard today. We're going to be more looking at the how, so the skill involved. And we're going to take it right back to basics and address body position, arm movement, and the all-important breathing. Now, some of these steps might even seem too easy for you or not that relevant to swimming, but trust us, it's worth going through each step, mastering the first one before you move on to the next. Many people choose breaststroke for the simple reason that you can swim without putting your face and your head in the water. So that is the first aspect that we need to address. Now, if you're uncomfortable doing that, we need to take it right back to basics. So start off by making sure you've got a pair of goggles that are leak-proof. We're going to stay on your face and keep your eyes dry. I think you're going to just hold on to the side of the wall and simply put your face into the water whilst breathing out with the bubbles. And you want to try and keep your eyes open as well, because that is the whole point of wearing goggles. So breathe in as you lift your head and then repeat breathing back out under the water, which will be making the bubbles appear. And then obviously as you lift your head back out of the water, you breathe in and you start breathing out as you're putting your face in. Continue until you lift it up again. So there should be a constant trickle of bubbles. And just practice making sure you keep those eyes open, because if you haven't used goggles before, that might be a natural reaction to try and close them. And this exercise will just help you get comfortable with your face being submerged and begin those breathing skills that you're going to need to swim front crawl efficiently. Once you're comfortable with your face in the water, it's now time to actually progress this to moving forwards. And the best way is to start with a streamlined push off the wall. You probably already push off the wall if you swim breaststroke, but the difference being you want to have your head down in a streamlined position. So as you go to push off, just let yourself sink slightly under the surface, bend your knees, and you're going to extend your legs, pushing yourself forward. So have one hand on top of the other. Try to squash your head in between your arms, so you're making yourself into a pencil shape, and continually breathe out during this. And once you've run out of air and you're at the surface, simply stop, take a breath, and swim back to the wall. Now, to progress this, we're going to add in the legs. So repeat the movement exactly the same, but soon after you've pushed off the wall, just start a small flutter kick. So it should be a really small motion that's coming from your hips. There'll be a gentle bend in your knees. Your ankles need to be floppy and your toes pointed at the same time, if you can manage that. And you're going to do this breathing out whilst you go in that streamlined position, but as you start to run out of air, come up to the surface, stop, take a breath, and swim back to the wall. Right, time to add in one arm pull. So again, you're going to do the same streamlined push off, the same bit of kicking, but this time as you get to the surface, you'll start with both hands out in front of you, and then one hand, whichever you prefer, you're going to take and pull it underneath your body. This should feel like you're reaching your whole arm over a barrel that's in front of you before you then get hold of that water and you push it down towards your hips. Now, when your hand reaches your hip, you can simply stop there, take that breath, and return to the wall. Don't worry about trying to breathe at this stage. Do this a few times and try doing it with the other arm a few times as well. Well, once you're comfortable with the steps so far, and you've repeated them several times, and they're starting to feel a little less awkward, you want to add in some rotation. So this is looking at adding rotation combined with the pull. So as you begin that pull phase, you're going to actually rotate your hip on that side slightly down. And then as you start pulling and your arm moves through, as it gets to around the midway point, your hip should naturally start to rotate back up towards the surface, almost as if you're trying to move your hip out of the way of your hand as it comes towards the end of the pull. Now, this is important as it allows you to use those larger muscle groups for pull, making you more efficient. And I understand if you're starting to get a little bit bored of stopping and swimming back to the wall every time, but it is worth being patient right now and really trying to finesse those movements and limiting any fatigue. And once you've really got this dialed, then move on to the next step. Now we've got the underwater aspect sorted, we need to look at the over the water, or the recovery part of the stroke. So once your hand finishes that underwater pull and reaches your hip, it needs to make sure it keeps moving. So hopefully you've rotated your hip on that side slightly upwards, so it'll make it easier for you to get that arm out of the water. And the movement comes from your shoulder. Your elbow should have a nice, relaxed, natural bend. And as the hand then comes forward, the hand should be nice and relaxed and loose, coming past your shoulder, past your ear and your head. And then as it gets towards the top end of the stroke, your fingers should be pointing into the water in front of you to make a nice smooth entry into the water so you're ready to start that next pull phase. Now is a good time to progress this to trying to do it continuously. So you might want to pop some fins on as they will help with that propulsion. And you can stick to just doing one arm. So keep your spare arm just out in front in that streamlined position and concentrate on doing the single arm. Alternatively, you can do a few strokes on the right with just one arm and then swap to doing a few strokes on the left, just keeping the kick moderate so that you're finding it much easier if you are moving forwards through the water at a faster pace. Well, after 1 or 2 arm cycles, you're probably going to be starting to run out of air. That's if you haven't already. So it's time we need to address the breathing. And if you haven't popped fins on yet, it's a good point to do so. Well, initially, I want you to start with your right arm. So keep your left arm extended in front of you, and you're going to do that full pull phase under the body. And then as your hip rotates up towards the ceiling at the end of your stroke, that's where I want you to pause. So with your right hand just next to your hip and your shoulder and hip slightly pointing up towards the ceiling, which is then going to make it easy or easier for you to rotate your head to take a breath. So from this position, you're simply going to rotate, not lift, just rotate your head to the right, only far enough so that your mouth gets out of the water so you can take that in breath. And then you're going to return your head back to the midline so you're looking at the bottom of the pool, as well as your shoulder and your hip, and rotate so that you're back in a horizontal position. Continue breathing out, and once you've emptied your lungs, I want you to still stay in the same position. You're going to rotate your full body back to the side again, and then take that breath in. Once you've filled your lungs with a single breath, rotate back, breathe out. And this is when it's going to be important to just keep a steady, but not too hard a kick on one side, and then have a go on the other side. Find out which side feels easiest for you. And once you're comfortable with this motion, it's time to add in the recovery phase of the swim stroke, because this is actually when you take your breath. So imagine we're just going to do one arm to start with again. So your left arm is extended. You've got to the end of that pull phase and your arm is coming out over the top like we've already covered, and you're still rotated in that slightly upwards direction where it makes it easier to breathe. And as your arm comes over, there's almost a bit of a window, and that's where you want to try and take that breath through the window that your arm and your elbow make. And as your hand comes into the water at the front of the stroke, that's when your head returns into the water and you start your breathing out process. And obviously you repeat that. So try and do just one arm for a few strokes, and then maybe if you need a rest, and then have a go on the other side with the other arm. But once you're happy doing it on the right side and on the left, I then want you to do something that's actually called catch-up, but don't get hung up on the name. Basically, you're going to do one full pull on the right, back to the front of the stroke, one full on the left. And this is where you've got the option to take a breath either side, whichever one you're more comfortable with. And once you've got that dialed in and you can do a length comfortably, it's then time to try to bring it into the full stroke. So it's basically that, but sped up. So there will be no dead points, no pauses. Your arms need to continually move at kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, so to start. So you push off, you take that first stroke, but whilst that stroke is then coming at the start of the recovery over the top, your next arm, or your left arm, needs to then start taking the other stroke. So the rotation of your hips should help this movement feel more natural. So as you rotate forwards with your recovery hand coming into the water, your other hand's going to be underneath the water and starting to move towards your hips as you rotate your body to that opposite side. Now, this might sound really complicated, but I think if you go and give it a go, it will feel more natural than you realize. And I would still keep fins on because they're just going to help with that forward propulsion and help it to feel more natural and a little bit more efficient whilst you're still working things out. Now, as with all of these steps we've covered so far, make sure that you're getting plenty of rest, because the concentration really needs to be on quality, not quantity, until you've got it dialed in. So do a length at a time, take a rest, keep those fins on if you want, or even you could add a pull buoy if you're going to help with the buoyancy, if that's something you're struggling with. But if you do start to get a bit fatigued or you feel that you're doing it wrong, don't be afraid to go back one step, two steps, even back towards the beginning, break it down again and build it back up. And this is going to take a lot of time, time. Swimming does require patience, but it's worth really getting those fine points dialed in before you progress forwards, because once you've got the bad habit, it's going to be much harder to get rid of than actually taking a step back now. So good luck with your swimming journey. Once you start to get more relaxed in that full stroke of front crawl, you can increase the distance and start to work on increasing the speed, but that's going to be a video for another day. So keep focusing on these drills, quality over quantity. Good luck with your swimming journey. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. Give us a like, and remember, you can click on the bell icon and you can subscribe to our videos.